Welcome to Turtle Talk. This is Morgan's story and the family's journey. I'm Craig, and
I'm Michelle. Welcome.
welcome back to Turtle Talk. I'm Craig, and
Michelle.
And we're just going through, and we've talked a little bit about the court case. We've talked a little bit, not a lot. We've talked a lot about the journey and Morgan's recovery from the traumatic brain injury. What we really haven't talked about a whole lot is family life and the impact or the difference in the dynamic at home. So just had a couple of questions I really need answered for our audience, for me too, but mostly for the audience. But what is normal now versus normal before the accident? As far as, let's just talk about you and Tom to start. I mean, how's your relationship?
It's some days it's more of a struggle. It's different. Our kids are growing, and we should be traveling together, doing fun stuff that we want to do. There's a cycle in a marriage. You get married, you have kids, then the kids leave the nest, and then you kind of get your second honeymoon, and then you retire together, and that's how the progression goes. But our child cycle will never end.
Right.
And everything with Tom and I, like, we can't just say, hey, we're running to Vegas for the weekend, or we're going to go on a cruise, or let's go to Mexico, or whatever. We can't do that anymore because we can't just fly by the seat of our pants and do those fun things as a couple, because our couple is a threesome. Because whatever we do has to include Morgan. We don't have people besides the siblings that can stay overnight with her, that understand her schedule, that understand her. It's hard. This isn't what either one of us envisioned, and I wouldn't change it. So this is my child. This is our child. And Tom and I are not wired in a way where we could just dump her in a nursing home or bring a caregiver in and just go off gallivanting about life. That's not who we are. That doesn't mean it doesn't come with quite a few tears and anxiety, regrets, frustrations. Tom loves to ride motorcycle. And he's like, honey, I just want you to go for a ride with me. And I can't. I cannot get myself on that bike with him at all, because my biggest fear is if we have an accident on the motorcycle, who's taking care of Morgan? And to me, a brain injury is a reality now. Like, our friend's child had a motorcycle accident, had a brain injury too. And he's blind, and his whole life changed. Their whole life changed. And so I envision, oh my gosh, if we have a car accident or a motorcycle accident, I mean, granted, we could have a car accident at any time too, but it's just the fear of getting on that motorcycle, and I can't do it. I can't. So that causes some stress with us. There's times when Tom would be like, let's just go out for dinner, and I'm so exhausted from the day with Morgan, I just want to go to bed. He comes home from work, and we do supper together, and then I hand her off to him. So we don't even get to sit and cuddle on the sofa and watch TV together anymore, because there's just not It's not a thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So everything changed. How we plan stuff, how we do stuff. We're very thankful for her siblings because they are willing to step in long enough for us to run to the store, just go get some groceries. Or one night we snuck out and went to 10 miles away to the town and got ice cream and drove right back. Yeah, it's just, that's just how it is. You know, our intimate life together, you know, is we don't get to go on dates anymore. We don't get to just snuggle on the sofa. We don't get to sleep late in the morning on the weekend. You know, I miss those days. Go down and grab a couple coffees and put them on a tray, and then we just sit in bed there and watching TV and drinking our morning coffee and just visiting. And now it seems like we snap orders at each other more than converse.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard.
It's different.
It is way different.
How do you both handle things with Morgan, like surgery?
You know, any care with her is stressful. It really is. Surgeries are dreadful. They're really dreadful. There's always a fear. You know, she just had a surgery last week. And making sure that the hospital allows us to go back with her while they put her under. And then as soon as she's asleep, out the door we go. And then they bring us back in when she's in recovery. So we're there when she wakes up because we're her constant.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just sit there and there's always the fear. She's gone through so many surgeries, so many. And every one of them was just gut-wrenching. That, is she going to make it through the surgery? Is something in this surgery going to trigger something else? Is this going to affect her brain? Is this going to, you know, it seems like it gives us constant stress over flashing back to the beginning.
Right.
You know, every surgery is more fearful than the last. She had a tooth pulled that we put her under for. And I was just crawling out of my skin while that was going on. You know?
Can't imagine. What's been the most difficult surgery that you've had to wait for her to get out of?
You know, it had to be those external fixators on her feet because the surgeries were extremely long, like 7-8 hour long. And, you know, you're just like, is she okay? You know, how's she doing? Is her heart rate good? Is her breathing good? You know, there's always a fear of surgeries, but you know, you're like, okay, it's no big deal. You know, I have your appendix out or whatever. But the fear with her always seems so exacerbated by her history.
Yeah.
You know, we look at her and she's delicate. She's
Morgan.
I know. And it's stressful. And then, you know, our fears, it's like Tom and I can't, you're afraid to say what your fear is.
Yeah.
Because if you say it out loud, it's going to happen. That's the fear.
Yeah.
If I actually say this out loud, something's going to happen, or that's going to happen. You know, so then we can't even sit and like talk about what's going on because we're afraid to say any fear that we have or what we're thinking. And so then instead we end up just snipping at each other over stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Time and time again, and it just, it's kind of like when your baby goes in and has tubes in their ears. That's usually their first big surgery. And that's nerve-wracking. But this is like tenfold worse. And so you sit and you wait and you pace, and the hospital's like, you can go, we'll page you the minute. And it's like, if I leave here,
Staying right here.
I'm staying right here. Like, I have laid on floors in the waiting rooms trying to, just take a little nap or something, and it just, if I could be in the surgical suite, I would. But
They frown upon that.
they do frown upon that. So yeah, it just, surgeries are any hospitalization for her. It feels like we regress a little, even though the surgeries are for a benefit. This latest surgery we just had like a week ago, they cut right here from the hip down into her leg and isolated the nerves that caused the knee not to bend.
Oh.
Like, when Morgan would activate to walk, this knee would lock.
Oh.
And, her brain saying bend, like when you're walking, it's so automatic for us, but there's something in your brain that always fires and says, here, this is what your mechanism needs to do. And it was like over circulated, or, too much electrical charge to this. So they went in and isolated the nerves that were causing that misfire to happen constantly. And then they just snipped those 3 nerves. And now her knee just bends beautifully, so easy, where before we had to fight. We'd have to crank, and I'm like, geez, Morgan, I'm going to get a brain aneurysm trying to bend your leg, because you would have to fight so hard to get that leg to bend.
She can move it
Now today, she's
herself.
it's free as she's kicking now, and so her brain is telling her knee what to do, and now those nerves are not causing issue because they've just been eliminated.
Yeah.
It's, that's that selective neurectomy surgery that she had in the arms, and and it's just, wow. And her doctor was all her doctors are amazing, but Dr. Wu was so awesome at getting this. I'm every day, it's like the results are coming in clearer and clearer every day. So I'm excited for her follow-up to see where exactly we're at, but it looks really good.
No, well, you have to do it on the other one too.
The other leg seems to be bending pretty well on its own. She did say it was an option if we so chose later on, but let's heal from this one, get back into walking therapy and see where we're at, and then see what we think. So I'm really, really pleased with the surgery, but we knew it would do well for her. It's just going through the motions of it, and then nerve-wracking, and
Surgery itself.
yes.
Switching back to you and Tom. Now, you've always been on the same page as far as advocating for Morgan. Have you two butted heads like most adults and married couples do?
Yeah, there's times when I think her care plan should go one way and Dad thinks it should go another way, but it seems like those times are few and far between. Where we really butt heads is our time at home and who should do what for Morgan at the time. Like, I take care of her all day long while he's at work, and then he comes home and I expect him to take over, like, just feed her that one meal a day, and because I do the other 2. So when you come home, do it, and then help me get her ready for bed and stuff. And there's days where he comes home from work just exhausted, and he's out doing hard manual labor every day, and he just needs to sit and let his back rest because his back is super bad. So I get mad because, well, I need you to do this to give me a break. But he's like, you need to give me some grace because I've had a horrible day at work, and to lift her or transfer her is just too much for me right now. So that's where we don't say it to each other every time, but it builds.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
because we don't want to hurt the other one. And we both have equally stressful situations in our day, but we let it build. And then it turns into a ugly shouting match because, well, I don't think you're doing enough. And he's like, well, I don't think you're doing enough, or you got to let me do things my way. It can't always be how you wrote it down or what, so there's been a lot of growing pains that way. Just, we have to remember to give each other grace. And sometimes it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Because there's no break at the end of the day. It doesn't end.
Yeah.
You
don't get to do the grandparent thing where you shut them off.
Right.
Do you guys work through it by yourselves? Do you? I don't know if
we've talked about counseling, but we don't have time.
Right.
Like, where do you squeeze it in? And I sure don't want to go to counseling with Morgan.
Right.
Because
she doesn't need to be the brunt of your problem.
Right.
Your marriage problem.
Even though her situation is causing the problem, we don't ever want to make her feel bad.
It's no fault of hers.
It's no fault of hers, So we're actually pretty good. I think this situation has brought us really close together, but even more distant from each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like 99% of the time, we're pretty much on the same page, and the routine is kind of the same. And where it's separated us is there's no freedom.
Like, how's your marriage?
It exists.
Yeah. You're married.
We're married. I don't know. I love my husband. He loves me.
Yeah.
We don't ever want to be apart. But it's just different. Like, some days, a lot of days, we're just two people living in the same house.
Feel like roommates?
We do. We feel like roommates a lot. And that kind of really sucks.
Mm-hmm.
You
the whole goal is to not to have this video vlog and blog whatever we want it to be a manual for people that will just start entering this stuff, unfortunate as it is. What would be your number one advice? Not that this is the end of anything, but what would be your best advice to a couple, a couple going through this with their child?
The advice given to us was, join these support groups and, make sure you take time for you.
What does that mean?
Yeah, that's kind of a stupid advice. First off, none of us really want to go to a support group because everybody, and I know people that do go to support groups, and God bless them. For me, I can't do it because I know what my reality is, and it sucks some days. Some days it's amazing, but this is not an easy life. And when you get a room full of people all talking about your children with traumatic brain injuries and stuff, it's just something you don't want to add more burden onto your plate of carrying somebody else's pain with your own pain.
And I can imagine that the comparison envy.
The comparison is horrible.
Kill me.
So when we were in the rehab hospital, we met a family whose son had a brain injury. After about a year, he's up walking, talking. And so, of course, here I am saying, okay, in a year, Morgan's going to be like this. And then that year came and went, and it crushed my soul. Then there's another gal that we met who, after 5 years, was up walking and talking. You know, it was hard to understand her, but she's doing it with her family's care. She'll never be on her own, but you know, the girl from Utah that we became in contact with, everybody's at a different level of recovery. And you find yourself jealous that why is that girl walking and my daughter's not? And
Yeah.
you know, and one of the kids that I knew, he passed away. He had a seizure and passed away. And that's a place you can't even let your brain go to.
Right.
So my advice to them is you just got to find comfort in strangers, in friends. You know, counseling, if you're lucky enough to find a good counselor and find the time. And the other thing is we went through some really horrible caregivers who, they didn't really hurt Morgan or anything like that, but they hurt our family. You know, we welcomed them into our home to help us with Morgan, and it was more of a social experiment. And then they go to local places and they would talk about us outside of our home, talk about her, and
Yuck.
it is yuck. You know, and so I guess my best advice is you just have to find a path that you can sustain and make sure you put some people in places in your life that can help you sustain that path. You know, friends. Some of our friends are just, because our life is different. We can't go out for dinner and we can't go out drinking and we can't go to parties with them anymore. That part of our life will never be. It's gone. But we have dear friends who we don't see a lot, but if we needed anything, would drop everything and come running. You know? And those are the friends that every couple of months they just call up and say, hey, we're bringing dinner and we'll be there on Saturday. And it's like, and then they sit here and they just listen. Like you guys,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, I don't have this figured out.
They just give us you know, it's friends like you guys and our other dear friends that they just show up and give us support without being overbearing about it. Sometimes it's just being there, you know?
I learned a long time ago that it's not usually about me.
So,
Big family. So.
yeah. Yeah. You know, so those things help. You know, I wish it's hard for us to open up because it feels like when we do see our friends that we're always talking about the same thing. Always.
I've noticed with my friends that have kids, and I never understood it until having my kids, we always talk about poop.
Oh, yeah.
In reality, and is a euphemism for just kid stuff. So I'm sure, like, when you're living, every day you live in the care of Morgan.
Right.
So when friends come over, I mean, you're going to talk shop. You're going to talk about the care of Morgan.
Right, because I don't have anything else.
Right. Yeah. You're not going online and playing video games for 7 hours.
I don't have a job per se that I go to because my job is taking care of her.
Yeah.
You know, and You can talk about your garden, and I planted a few trees, but that gets kind of boring after about 5 minutes, and
Yeah.
it's stressful. Sometimes I feel like the only thing Tom and I ever get to talk about is the kids and
Yep.
Morgan. And some days I wonder, and I know he wonders, like, where'd my wife go or where'd my husband go? Where's that funny guy that we used to giggle over stupid stuff? And where's my spontaneous wife who would run in the room acting all crazy, and she'd jump on my lap and we'd giggle, giggle, giggle. I think we lost a big part of us in all of this. But what's the alternative? Like, that's the problem.
Right.
The alternative is you put Morgan in a nursing home, and what? You stop in when it's convenient?
Yeah. Worry from a distance.
I just, like I said, we're not wired that way. Our whole family's not wired that way. So I couldn't even, that would never, so we travel. Tom and I travel with Morgan, and, we do little sneakaways here and there, but it's always Morgan friendly. My favorite, I love aquariums. I could sit in an aquarium with Morgan for hours watching the fish swim by, but we took all our kids to Disney, and we took Morgan. It was an effort, but Disney was great.
Yeah.
Disney World in Florida was amazing. I could not believe all the rides that Morgan could go on, either in her chair or we transfer her into a seat. And I mean, it was extra effort, but there was never one unkind employee because it took us too long to get her in and out of the ride or anything like that. And I tell you what, the smiles on that girl's face was great.
Yeah.
So it's things like that we try and take some pleasure in, and try and get off that normal beaten path. And we feel guilty when we travel, like, oh, we don't have her standing frame, she can't stand, or we can't do these exercises, but once again, it's sometimes you have to give up something for a little bit to restore other things.
Yeah.
So it's
Give and take.
give and take.
You mentioned the kids. So what is life with the kids? I mean, we talk about how it's changed a little bit. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Like, Adam's always been down the road, so everything's good there, and we got the grandbabies, and that's fun. They come over for dinner, and so for him, yeah, my sister had a horrible accident and she's different, but he sure doesn't treat her any different. He's like, hey, kid, what are you doing? Are you picking on mom? Razzing her. Brendan, I know it affected Brendan, and part of me feels like his quick leap to the military was just to get away from the situation. At the time, I think, I kind of feel like maybe he was running. We always knew he wanted to go to the military, but it just seemed like it happened so fast after graduation that we were kind of taken back by it a little bit. I see a sadness in him every now and then, because this doesn't go away.
Right.
Because him and Morgan were so close.
Yeah.
Those two did all kinds of crazy things together, and that stopped. And one night it stopped. So I think part of him is missing his friend. He's married now, and we have 2 grandbabies there, and it's wonderful. And but when we visit them or they visit, I always see a little sadness in his face with his sister. And then there's the triplets who, I feel like some days maybe the girls are scared to leave They're very protective. They're very much homebodies. They really don't date. None of the triplets are doing things that normal teenagers, 21-year-olds should be doing. And I think for them, I think it's the worst. I think the grief, the loss, being scared has really changed their trajectory of what they're going to do in life. You know, they all three still live at home, which is totally fine. I love having them at home, you know, and I just don't know. Tom and I are at a loss of, how do you help your kids when we can't even explain it?
Right.
You know,
Well, when it happened, they were what, 10 and 11, 10,
12.
12?
They were 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's going to color a lot of their development.
It really did. And, we've talked about our failures as parents. We were so focused on Morgan that we really feel like we failed those three especially. Brendan was going into his senior year of high school and stuff. And, so he had a really well base and grounding and everything. But for these guys, they're little, they're getting kind of bounced around. Mom and dad aren't there like we were. It just, I see where it really, really affected them. And unfortunately, it still carries with them. I wonder some days, about all of them, like I said, they don't really date. And so is that because of what happened? Sister's out with this guy, and she doesn't come home normal. So,
Okay.
and they don't want to talk about it a whole lot, so.
We probably don't know either.
Right. I don't think they really understand the depth of stuff. So all we can do is just encourage them to keep living life and living large, and
Yeah. That's all you can do.
that's all we can do.
Normal people routines. What would you
Normal people routines.
would you say you have kind of a normal routine,
Yeah.
like grocery shopping on Saturdays or
Well, we've never been normal.
okay.
So, my big thing is, everybody needs to try and be home for dinner. And we try and have a big family dinner once a week, which we've been super busy, so that's kind of gone by the wayside lately. But, we try to do family dinner once a week. I just randomly get groceries whenever we need them. Like I said, I'm big on this delivery service stuff now. It's great. Holidays are still important. We've tried to just keep life the same, even though it's drastically different. I do wish I had more money to hire the lawn work done. I wish I could hire a driver because I'm so tired of driving. That's all I ever do. But, even in the midst of all the chaos of me constantly traveling with her to Mayo and wherever, and Tom working out of town and stuff, we're still pretty hard grounded in family and faith, and it's church every Sunday, it's family dinner once a week, it's if on the evening, if you're not at work, you should be at dinner. That kitchen table is the most important place in the world. You don't put the phones down, and you sit and you visit. And I tell you what, there's my advice. There is my advice to other people going through this, is that kitchen table time is probably the most important thing to keep your family together.
Yeah. Social life. I think we talked a little bit about it.
Yeah,
Friends come over.
Friends come over, but other than that,
Yeah.
I mean,
You're not in the bowling league.
no bowling leagues. I don't even know the last movie we went to. I remember here recently I said, "Oh, honey, let's go out for dinner real quick. Let's run to Menards and then go out for dinner." And we went to Menards and we're like, screw it. I think we hit Arby's or something and then came home, ate in the car on the way home. I feel like we're in more of a constant state of exhaustion than anything, but I don't know.
It's not like a 9 to 5.
No, it's definitely not a 9 to 5. I do appreciate the moments when her siblings, let us sneak out and run to the store real quick and, so that helps, but.
It's good.
Yeah.
One last thing I wanted to talk about in this episode was kindness of strangers.
Yeah.
It's the motivation. It's the plug that keeps you going.
It really is. It is the plug that keeps us going. I was in Rapid City here a couple weeks ago, spending time with Tom, and I was in Walmart, and it was a frustrating day in Walmart, and I'm walking through the store, and I'm frustrated about a lot of stuff, not just being in the store, not just rude people, not parking. It was all adding up, and I catch myself, few tears running, so I'd wipe them and we keep going. And I had to print out something, but I had no printer and everything was working against me. So I go to the photo department. I'm like, I'm just going to upload them as a photo and print them that way. And this gentleman came up and he says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm just having a day." And he says, "I really need to pray over you guys. I need to pray over your daughter." And he prayed over us, gave me a hug, and he said, "Mom, you're doing great." And I thought, that's all it took for a new bounce in my step. So off we go, and we continue doing our shopping, but then these idiots with no situational awareness are causing me all kinds of grief because we started in the pharmacy side and worked our way over, and now we're in the grocery side, which is always a zoo. And by the time I get done, I'm cursing in my head again because I'm aggravated, frustrated. I'm standing in the checkout line, and this old retired Marine comes over, big old teddy bear of a guy, he must be in his early 80s, and he says, "Does anybody ever give you a hand or tell you how good a job you're doing?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact." And he says, "Mom, you're doing really good. You keep it up, and he says, "Don't be afraid to ask for help." And I'm like, "Thank you." And he says, "Could you use a hug?" "Oh, yeah, I'll use a hug." Gave me just the biggest, best hug, and sometimes that's just what you need, and so I appreciate those stranger moments, kind of helps you keep on the right path and know that you're doing good things, which the stranger moments to me are all a gift from God, It's a God thing.
It's a God thing.
It's a God thing. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate it. We love hearing from you guys, so keep the comments and the questions coming for us.
Yes. Love the questions. Please subscribe. Go to www.givemorgan.org or visit me at my real estate website, realtorcraigbertrand.com. And we always want your questions, comments, like, and share wherever you listen or watch.
Thank you.
Thank you.